Siobhan Huggins, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Yeah, it's so awesome to hear like all of the background and be like, man, there's so much that's changed since I've last been on here. And so today it's not just me, but we also have Leslyn. I actually just gave a presentation on one of our other papers at Low-Carb Boca just this past weekend when we're recording. And the way that I introduced her there was that she is a lymphatic black belt. So, Leslyn, please give us some more details to what I mean.
Amazing.
Thank you. I haven't had a chance to see the recording of that, Siobhan, but that's very nice. I like that.
That's pretty cool.
I am an occupational therapist, and I got my doctorate that focuses on lymphedema and obesity, and so I have been a certified lymphedema therapist since 2000, and so I've been focusing on lymphatic diseases since that time, treating that as an occupational therapist. And lipedema fell into that also, that a portion of my patients had that. But of course, we've discovered so much more about lipedema, particularly since Siobhan joined us at Lipedema Simplified and a Lipedema project. So we've just been incredibly active since Siobhan got together with us and really motivated us to get more involved in research. And so the things that we've been finding about, particularly with diet and lymphedema and lipedema, have really grown leaps and bounds, with a lot of other researchers around the world really focusing on this issue as well. So it's very exciting.
Wow. That's awesome. We're certainly grateful that you could join us, both of you. This is such an amazing and important topic. And I've made this point several times where Nicole Laurent encouraged me a few years ago to put in ketogenic as a keyword onto Google Scholar so it can send you like studies, the latest studies that are coming out. And I half jokingly say it's almost annoying now. It feels like spam because I get emails like every other day with a huge list of studies that like I just don't have time to go through every single one of these. There's so many coming out on diet alone. And Siobhan, your work really kind of taught me how important this work is and how it's so like overlooked. And since you kind of talked about the condition and you talked about how you can look around and identify the condition, I feel like I'm starting to be able to kind of do that as well. And it's such a frustrating kind of topic and condition to have. Can you remind us a little bit about your personal story? And we mentioned a little bit in the introduction, but like we said, like a lot has changed. And yeah, can you remind us about your personal story and why this is so important to you?
Yeah, so in terms of lipedema, I mean, it was kind of a weird journey for me because I had abdominal obesity before I started a ketogenic diet, and that had resolved over the course of the diet, still resolved, thankfully. But then, like, that weight loss resulted in some disproportion appearing, and it was especially highlighted when I did a 2-week long water fasting experiment, and then some additional fasting after that. And I had posted before and during pictures. So I lost weight over the course of that experiment. But some people reached out to me privately and said, hey, like, have you ever looked into lipedema? Because how you're losing weight over this experiment is kind of like leaning towards that. And I essentially said, I don't know what that is. But I did talk to my doctor who referred me to a specialist, and I ended up getting diagnosed. But the other aspect that was really interesting to me is that that doctor, she's a lipedema specialist, and there were these like an entry survey, kind of like an intake form. And it asked about all these questions in terms of pain and all this other stuff. And often, like, there were write-in text boxes for that survey, and I had to put, like, not right now, but before a ketogenic diet, this was a problem. Just, like, over and over and over again. And I still have some issues related to it, so I tend to swell in the heat, and it makes me nauseous, and that's not fun. I do have to be careful about any weight gain because there's more recent research coming out indicating that that can be a trigger for progression. And then, like, that kind of goes into what I've been focusing a lot over the past couple of years, which is, like, lipedema does have these components of the symptoms that are very important. There's the fat gain component, the disproportion, the potential disfigurement, the pain that impacts a lot of people really severely, the swelling. But there's also, beyond that, there's the psychological component of wrestling with having a chronic condition that can make other people perceive you differently because it involves fat gain. That can be really difficult for a lot of people, and it can be really difficult around just trigger periods like pregnancy. Like there's a lot more women with lipedema diagnosed before they start trying for a family. Some are diagnosed after giving birth, and then it's like, I've spoken to some women who have said, like, I don't want to have children because they don't want to go through pregnancy and have their symptoms get worse, and that potentially impact their body, their mobility, their quality of life, but then also they don't want to pass it on to their children. So it, like, talking to a lot more women with lipedema has made me focus a lot, especially with the help of Catherine Seo, because this is like within her realm as well, of holistic approaches to address not just the physical symptoms of a disorder, but also look at the psychological impact that that's having, the emotional, how their social life is doing, making sure that they're well supported, and just the spiritual aspect as well, in terms of what is their reason for living, what is their reason for being here, what's their sense of purpose. All of that can be impacted by lipedema. So I've definitely felt some of that too, but also in a positive way as well, because I found such a niche in the lipedema community talking about all of this stuff, including nutrition. And then also the other aspects of the research, like the lymphedema connection that Leslyn and I and other co-authors have been looking at. And it's also hopeful, which is the really awesome thing. There's so much that could be studied and could be done that is so hopeful. Like, we could do a lot of really good stuff in the world, which is awesome.
I would love to have you clarify one thing, Siobhan, because one thing within your introduction was talking about you and interested in lipidology and how that is different from lipedema, because people might think that lipedema, the condition, is spelled Lipid, like lipids. And if you're going to try to Google this condition, you got to spell it correctly. So can you talk about that, the meaning behind the name of the condition and the correct spelling so people can learn more?
Yeah, so lipidology refers to the study of lipids or fats. So that would be triglycerides, cholesterol, LDL, lipoproteins, all of that stuff, which is how I entered the space. But then lipedema comes from the same root, so it also comes from lipids as in fat, but then the component at the end is coming from edema, so swelling or water accumulation. So it's swelling of the fat is where that name comes from. So with lipedema, it doesn't really have anything to do with cholesterol, but it is a condition. It's worth clarifying what it is. It's a condition that affects the fat and the connective tissue, and then there also seems to be some stuff going on with the lymphatic. So it's a very complex disorder. But the basic outline of it is that it nearly exclusively affects women. It results in a disproportionate accumulation of fat, typically on the lower body, but also the other limbs, like the arms. And that fat is often painful. So it could be painful with pressure, like let's say you have a cat walking across your lap. That could be painful. For some people, that pain is excruciating. But it could also be spontaneous pain. It could be a feeling of heaviness or tightness in the legs that correlates with a sensation of swelling in the legs. Easy bruising is common, or at least from what we've heard clinically from people working with these patients. And there's no known cure. That's the other aspect. But there is one other aspect of it, which is the lipedema tissue specifically, so in the lower body and the arms, if they're affected there, it tends not to respond very well to calorie restriction or exercise. But there's been some talk lately about adding an asterisk to it not being affected by diet in general, because it does seem to respond a lot better to ketogenic diets. So I always want to caveat here that even though we say that, like, we do see circumference reduction in the studies using ketogenic diets, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to normalize in everybody using a ketogenic diet. I've definitely seen some individuals, their after photo with keto, you wouldn't even guess that they had lipedema. But for some people, you can still tell, but when you talk to them, they talk about how much better they feel, regaining mobility, the pain reduction, the huge improvement in the quality of their life. So it's important to separate those things, and understand, like, with this condition, we understand a lot better now that it results in an accumulation of scar tissue within the fat. And that is really hard to get rid of. Whether you're talking about like a joint injury from sports, you can have scar tissue there. Anyone who's worked with that knows how difficult it is. But then the scar tissue in the fat is a whole other beast. There's a lot we don't know about it. But yeah, hopefully that helps clarify.